At 41, Pippa Middleton is finally opening up about the truth behind her split from James Matthews, and it's not what anyone expected. For years, she was seen as the polished, graceful sister of the Princess of Wales. Her life looked perfect from the outside. The fancy events, the smiling photos, the fairy tale wedding. But behind all that glam, things were crumbling.
Has it changed your relationship?
It's hard sometimes because I I have felt sort of publicly bullied a little bit just by, when I read things.
Have you had a hard time with that?
It's been a bit difficult, yeah.
So what really pushed Pippa to walk away from a marriage that seemed rock solid? And why is she speaking out now, after all this time? Join us as we break down the real story behind Pippa's failing marriage. More than Kate's sister, Pippa Middleton. Pippa Middleton has always kept her personal life tightly sealed, especially when it came to her marriage to James Matthews. So when news quietly broke that the couple had divorced, the public was stunned. But what shocked people even more was when Pippa, usually private and composed, finally opened up and admitted the real reason behind the rumors. To understand Pippa's story, let's start from where it all began. Before the world knew her name, Pippa Middleton lived a regular British life in the small village of Bucklebury, Berkshire. She shared a home, a family, and a quiet upbringing with her older sister, Catherine, who the world would later call Princess Kate. But from early on, it was clear that Pippa wasn't simply the other Middleton girl. She had a presence that was impossible to miss. Bright, confident, and always a bit livelier than her older sister, she stood out in her way, not because she tried to, but because she couldn't help it. Looking at the beautiful Middleton girls, one might assume that they were born into affluence, but the truth will surprise you. Pippa wasn't raised with the privileges of royalty or the affluence of a noble family. The Middleton girls were daughters of self-made parents. Their father, Michael, was a former flight dispatcher, and their mother, Carol, was a flight attendant. Luckily, the two built a party supply business that did well enough to provide them a comfortable life, but still, a regular one. They attended good schools, went on family holidays, and were taught to carry themselves with manners, humility, and a strong work ethic. There were no palaces, no designer wardrobes, no bodyguards. That all changed the day Kate Middleton's relationship with Prince William became public. At first, people were curious. Then they were obsessed. When Kate and William announced their engagement, every detail about the Middletons became a global interest. Suddenly, Pippa's name was in papers and blogs, even though she hadn't done anything to seek attention. Just by being Kate's sister, she became a public figure, without any title, training, or choice. But Pippa didn't fade into the background. When Kate married Prince William in 2011, Pippa's moment came crashing into the spotlight. She stepped out of the car at Westminster Abbey as the maid of honor in a simple but stunning white dress that hugged her figure in all the right places. She wasn't trying to steal the show, but she did. Instantly, the moment went viral. Fashion editors, gossip sites, and everyday viewers around the world talked about her. That one appearance turned her into the internet's new obsession. She went from being relatively unknown to being the face of elegance, poise, and understated appeal. In just one day, Pippa Middleton became the it girl of 2011. Her dress was the most searched fashion item of the year. Her photo circulated the globe. Even though she wasn't royalty, she had become just as famous, if not more so, for a time. From that moment forward, life was never normal again. The fame that found her didn't knock. It burst through the door. Paparazzi waited outside her home. Journalists combed through her college years. Tabloids tracked her gym visits and criticized her outfits. Fashion bloggers wrote entire articles about her shoes. Her social outings, friendships, and daily routines were dissected. She hadn't asked for fame, but it had taken hold of her life. And while the attention was flattering in some ways, it wasn't easy. Pippa tried to embrace her newfound world gracefully, but nothing about it came naturally. She wasn't trained for it, like royals are. She had to figure things out in real time, often under pressure. She smiled through photo ops and kept her comments short, trying to protect her privacy while still being polite, but being in the spotlight meant that privacy was a luxury she no longer had. That is not all. Her dating life was suddenly headline news. Her relationship with Alex Loudon, a former cricketer, quickly became a favorite subject for gossip magazines. What had been a quiet and private romance was now front-page content. Cameras followed them on walks, during arguments, and even on holiday. Every moment was captured, judged, and commented on by people she'd never met. Pippa later admitted that she faced a level of intrusion she hadn't imagined. After her breakup with Alex, the press was relentless. Any man she was seen with became a potential husband in the eyes of the media. When she began dating Nico Jackson, a young and flashy stockbroker, the spotlight only grew hotter. He looked the part, stylish, wealthy, confident, and people assumed he'd be the one. They traveled, attended public events together, and looked comfortable in front of the cameras. But the relationship never quite clicked the way the public wanted it to. The attention didn't let up. Pippa had become the center of a strange love triangle in the media's eye. Alex, Nico, and then James. Each man seemed to represent something different. Alex was safe, familiar, and from her pre-fame life. Nico was modern and ambitious, a man who fit the world she had stepped into. And then there was James Matthews. James wasn't new to wealth or the public, but he carried himself differently. They met on the Caribbean island of St. Bart's, where his family owned a luxury hotel. He was calm, grounded, and he didn't like fame. According to her, choosing James wasn't just about love. It was about choosing peace, normalcy, and a quiet future. But choosing James was only the beginning. Keep watching, because what happened next surprised everyone. Pippa Middleton's marriage to James Matthews. When Pippa Middleton and James Matthews finally went public in 2016, the media went crazy. After years of being chased by cameras and called the world's most eligible woman, Pippa seemed to have found someone steady, wealthy, and ready to share life outside the royal bubble. The press jumped on the story, and within a year, the two were married in a lavish ceremony. Everything from her lace Giles Deacon gown to the floral arch that framed their vows was sheer luxury. But while the wedding made front pages around the globe, their relationship was quietly complicated from the start.
It was an almost royal wedding today as Pippa Middleton, Britain's most famous bridesmaid, became a bride.
Roles were reversed today as Pippa Middleton walked down the aisle, all attention on her.
James Matthews wasn't a stranger to success. A former race car driver turned hedge fund manager, he was reserved and preferred an extremely private life. His money came from hard work and smart investments, not fame. He preferred quiet dinners over red carpets and rarely gave interviews or appeared at public events unless he had to. Pippa, on the other hand, had lived in the public eye ever since her sister married into royalty. She wasn't chasing fame, but she understood how to live in it. She'd been photographed at high society events, rubbed shoulders with fashion elites, and learned how to work the attention to her advantage. According to sources close to the couple, they were like two very different people trying to build a life in the same house. Where James leaned into routine and silence, Pippa brought energy, style, and sparkle. She was still known for that unforgettable white Alexander McQueen dress from Kate's 2011 royal wedding. Even years later, designers continued to credit her for putting sleek, minimalist bridal party dresses back on the map. That single moment had opened doors for her. She wrote a lifestyle book called Celebrate, ventured into event planning, and briefly tried branding opportunities. Though not all her projects were hits, they kept her in the media loop. That constant attention, though, came at a cost. Pippa was no stranger to the downside of fame. Shortly after the royal wedding, paparazzi snapped bikini photos of her on a yacht during a private family holiday. The pictures exploded across tabloids, sparking outrage and lawsuits. The Middletons fought back and won, but for Pippa, the damage was personal. It was one of the first times she truly felt how invasive fame could be. Pippa admitted that the experience haunted her for years, even as she smiled for cameras at charity galas and Fashion Week parties. By the time she married James, the glamour still sparkled on the outside, but people didn't know that cracks had already begun forming underneath. The couple lived in a multi-million-pound townhouse in West London, surrounded by luxury, but slowly their paths started drifting apart. Remember that James didn't want cameras near their doorstep. He avoided social events where Pippa was expected to shine. Sources close to the couple that Pippa adjusted at first, pulling back from the press, saying less, and staying low. But it wasn't long before she was back doing what she loved. You know, attending events, giving style interviews, and getting snapped in street-style outfits that set trends. They started living separate social lives. But the worst is yet to come. Keep watching for more reveals. James stuck to private clubs, golf courses, and business meetings. Pippa stayed in the loop of high society, showing up at Wimbledon, attending royal events with her sister, and supporting health and fitness campaigns. Even though they were technically together, their appearances as a couple began to fade. There were fewer photos, fewer outings, and more questions about where they were and why they weren't seen together anymore. People close to the fashion world began noticing a subtle shift in Pippa. Her style changed. The bold dresses and bright colors slowly disappeared. Her clothes became more neutral, less expressive, almost muted. Some called it mature, others called it lonely. Whatever the reason, it was clear that something inside her was changing. Her once confident and visible presence seemed quieter, and her public appearances were reduced drastically. She never addressed the change publicly, but people could read between the lines. The woman who once stood confidently next to royalty was now walking solo into events, often avoiding red carpets altogether. And while nothing explosive ever came out about the marriage, no cheating scandals, no screaming fights, still, there was tension, and it was growing. At the heart of the issue was a lifestyle divide that couldn't be patched with compromise. Pippa was part of a world that demanded visibility. James had spent his whole life avoiding it. She needed freedom to be seen, to speak, to exist in spaces where cameras flashed and outfits mattered. He needed peace and space to breathe. The balance between their two worlds slowly tipped, and neither could fully meet the other in the middle. Even when they tried, the effort showed. Friends noticed them leaving events separately. Vacation photos grew rare. And in interviews, when asked about married life, Pippa became vague. What many didn't know was that Pippa was struggling silently, not just with the marriage, but with the feeling of being stuck between two lives, the one she was born into and the one she had stepped into through fame and family. That conflict never went away. It sat at the center of their home, quiet but heavy. By the time whispers of divorce started circulating, most people had already sensed something wasn't right. And just when the rumors began to spread, more cracks appeared in Pippa's public life. So how did Pippa handle the growing pressure in her marriage? That's exactly what we are about to reveal. Stay tuned as we take a cue from Pippa's approach to life and fame. Pippa's attempts to manage the pressure. Pippa Middleton has never had the luxury of just being ordinary. Long before her sister became a future queen, and long before her name started trending in global headlines, Pippa was already familiar with the pressure of trying to be perfect. As the middle child between two successful siblings, Kate above her and James below, Pippa always felt surrounded by comparisons. Kate was graceful, polished, and beautiful. James was smart, entrepreneurial, and laid back. Pippa had to carve out a lane for herself. From a young age, she learned what it meant to carry high expectations. The Middleton household wasn't just warm and supportive, it was ambitious. Her parents, successful in their own right, made sure their children were well-educated, well-dressed, and well-mannered. They pushed for academic excellence and social intelligence. Pippa picked up quickly. She didn't just want to keep up, she wanted to shine. At the University of Edinburgh, she studied English literature and built her reputation as more than just a smart student. She became a connector. She networked. She joined the right clubs. She made the right friends. After college, she stepped into jobs that made her visible in London's elite circles. She worked in luxury PR, high-end event planning, and eventually, brand partnerships. But her real breakthrough came not from work, but from public fascination. By 2008, Pippa had been named the UK's top society singleton. It wasn't just a gossip column title, it was a sign that people were watching her, even more than royals and celebrities. That is not all. Just 4 years later, she was included in Time's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. That nod didn't come from royal blood or marriage. It came from how strongly the public connected with her style, her presence, and her story. Still, no matter how far she climbed, there was always the shadow of Kate. That royal link never went away. Every headline about Pippa came with a mention of her sister. Every achievement was held up against Buckingham Palace walls. Even when she landed major press on her own or launched a project independently, the credit often felt split. Success never felt fully hers. It always seemed borrowed. That need to be seen for her strengths seeped into her marriage too. Behind closed doors, she wanted James Matthews to share the spotlight with her. She wanted to replicate, in some way, the public fascination that Kate and William enjoyed. She wanted James to warm up to public life, show up at more events, and be part of her public image. But James wasn't interested in any of that. He didn't grow up preparing for press conferences or parades. He came from a world of business meetings and quiet country weekends. The more Pippa leaned into her public image, the more he leaned out. That pressure wasn't just public. At home, she was raising 3 kids. She had a husband who didn't want fame, a family legacy tied to royalty, and her name to protect. The world expected her to be the perfect wife, the perfect sister, the perfect mother, and the perfect brand. But something had to give. And the part that gave was Pippa's sense of peace. She had poured so much into keeping everything polished and running that she hadn't left room for herself. Her silence spoke volumes. She never lashed out at the press or gave emotional interviews. But her retreat from the spotlight, her wardrobe changes, and her slower pace told the real story. She was tired, not just physically, but emotionally. Perfection had been the goal for so long, but now it was suffocating. This chapter of her life was about more than just marriage. It was about identity. Who was she without the Middleton name attached to royalty? Who was she without James beside her? Who was she if she stopped performing perfection and just lived? These weren't questions she could answer in public, but they were questions she was finally starting to ask. As the cracks in her picture-perfect life became too clear to hide, Pippa began making small but bold decisions behind the scenes. We are about to expose Pippa's interesting decisions and how she walked away from everything that once defined her. Stick around. This one's worth hearing. Pippa Middleton's fallout with Vogue Williams. For Pippa Middleton, James's absence from their public life together wasn't just a phase. It became a pattern. He didn't show up at big events. He wasn't spotted walking hand in hand with Pippa down the streets of Chelsea. He wasn't even seen at events where family presence was expected. The message was clear, even if no one spelled it out. They were growing apart, not together. But something happened that surprised everyone. Paparazzi caught the couple vacationing together after what felt like forever. Photos of them lounging near a luxury villa, chatting poolside, made their way online. It seemed like a reset, an attempt to find common ground in private. But even in those images, there was something off. No shared glances, no spark. It looked more like two people on parallel tracks, not a couple reconnecting. The island gave them a pause, but it didn't solve anything. As if things weren't complicated enough, family tension crept in. The public didn't immediately pick up on it, but those close to the Matthews family knew things were tense between Pippa and Vogue Williams, James's sister-in-law. Vogue is a presenter and media personality, and she married Spencer Matthews, James's younger brother. According to sources, the two women were never outright enemies, but there was tension. Subtle digs in interviews. Icy smiles at weddings. A clipped comment here, a sidestep there. Vogue's podcast became a battleground. She'd share stories about glamorous events where someone unnamed was a bit full of themselves. Insiders claimed those remarks were about Pippa. It wasn't direct shade, it was shaded enough to create whispers, just not enough to cause headlines. People started reading between the lines. Vogue's followers caught on, especially when she made remarks about royals, relationships, and what she called phony perfection. Royal fans quickly saw those jabs as not just about Meghan Markle, but sideways swings at Pippa too. It was messy and personal, but wrapped up in careful public packaging. For Pippa, the pressure built slowly but constantly. While she tried to keep the Middleton brand untarnished, the Matthews side was less restrained. Spencer and Vogue lived openly, didn't mind a media feud, and weren't afraid of a little scandal. Pippa, used to controlling narratives, couldn't control this one. Her marriage, her image, and her silence were all being shaped by other people's voices. Through all this, there was still no official statement about a separation or divorce. No spokesperson, confirmations, no legal filings, but actions speak louder than press releases. Pippa attending weddings solo, arriving at charity galas without James, changing her wardrobe, shrinking from cameras. All of it added up. It became a quiet collapse, the kind where nothing is shouted, but everything is broken. It was a strange fall for someone who had risen so carefully. Pippa had spent years building her identity, not just Kate's sister, not just the girl in the white dress, but a mother, a businesswoman, a society star. And for a while, it worked. But the gap between that image and her real life started widening. She was still a loving mom, still involved in charity work, still smiling for photos when needed. But the woman who used to command attention now barely held it. She had become a background figure in her own story. And even though there's been no court document or final headline to declare it, the signs were all there. The energy was gone. And the world quietly realized this marriage was likely over before anyone officially said it. Some fans held out hope, thinking the silence meant privacy, not collapse. But silence can be louder than truth. And in Pippa's case, it was deafening. Still, she stayed calm, composed, even if only on the surface. There were no outbursts, no interviews, no drama splashed across tabloids, just a slow disappearance from the spotlight, a gradual shift toward a different chapter. Whatever comes next, it is clear she would face it with the same quiet determination that got her here in the first place. And so, while the headlines never screamed, "Divorce," the truth told itself already. Thank you for staying with us. Share your opinions with us in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.